For nearly 6 decades, the world has wondered about the mysterious man who captured Dolly Parton's heart. Carl Dean has been the phantom figure in one of country music's greatest love stories. Now, after 57 years of marriage, the reclusive husband has finally broken his silence, and what he reveals about their unconventional union will leave you absolutely stunned. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to our channel. The first time Carl Dean saw Dolly Parton, she was doing laundry outside the wishy-washy laundromat in Nashville. It was 1964, and she had just moved to Music City the day before, with dreams bigger than the Tennessee mountains she left behind. He was driving by in his white pickup truck when something made him stop. Maybe it was her bright red outfit, or that unmistakable blonde hair. But Carl knew his life was about to change forever. What happened next would become the foundation of a love story that defied every single rule of celebrity romance. Carl Dean was never meant to be famous. While his wife would go on to become one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment history, Carl chose a completely different path. He built a successful asphalt paving business in Nashville, and for 57 years, he has stayed almost completely out of the public eye. No red carpets, no award shows, no magazine interviews. Until now, the man who knows Dolly better than anyone else in the world has remained silent about their extraordinary marriage. The truth about their relationship is more complex than anyone imagined. While Dolly was building her empire and becoming a global icon, Carl was living a completely separate life. He would wake up at dawn to run his business while she would come home at midnight from recording sessions. They would pass like ships in the night, sometimes going weeks without a proper conversation. Most marriages would crumble under such pressure, but Carl and Dolly had made a pact from the very beginning that would save their relationship time and time again. Carl reveals that early in their marriage they made 3 promises to each other. First, they would never try to change who the other person was. Second, they would give each other complete freedom to pursue their dreams. Third, they would always come home to each other, no matter how far apart their worlds might drift. These simple rules became the blueprint for a marriage that survived when everyone said it would fail. The entertainment industry is littered with broken relationships and bitter divorces. Celebrity marriages rarely last more than a few years, let alone nearly 6 decades. So how did a country superstar and a businessman who hates the spotlight make it work when so many others failed? Carl says the answer is simpler than people think. They never forgot why they fell in love in the first place. That day at the laundromat, Carl saw something in Dolly that had nothing to do with fame or fortune. He saw a young woman with fire in her eyes and dreams in her heart. She was funny and smart and kind, and she made him laugh like no one ever had before. When she looked at him, she did not see a future celebrity husband or a ticket to success. She saw a tall, handsome man with gentle eyes who treated her with respect and made her feel safe in a world that often felt overwhelming. Their early years were not easy. Dolly was struggling to make it in Nashville, playing in dingy clubs for barely any money. Carl was working long hours trying to establish his business. They lived in a tiny apartment with barely enough room to turn around. But every night when they came home to each other, the world outside disappeared. They would sit on their second-hand couch, eating beans and cornbread, talking about their dreams until the sun came up. Carl remembers the night Dolly got her first big break. She had been chosen to join Porter Wagoner's television show, which was a massive opportunity for any country singer. But it meant she would be traveling constantly, and their time together would become even more limited. Most husbands might have felt threatened or jealous, but Carl was nothing but proud. He knew this was what she was born to do, and he would never stand in her way. As Dolly's star rose higher and higher, Carl made a conscious decision to stay in the shadows. It was not because he was ashamed or intimidated by her success. He simply had no interest in that world. He did not want to smile for cameras or make small talk at industry parties. He wanted to run his business and come home to his wife. That was enough for him. But staying out of the spotlight came with a price. The media could not understand why Dolly's husband never appeared in public. Rumors started to swirl. Some said their marriage was a sham. Others claimed Carl did not really exist. There were whispers about affairs and secret divorces. Every tabloid had a theory about why Carl Dean remained hidden. The truth was much simpler and somehow more radical. He just wanted to be left alone. Dolly understood this about her husband from the beginning. She never pressured him to change or to become someone he was not. When she won awards, she did not beg him to accompany her. When she had premieres or important events, she went alone or with friends. She protected his privacy fiercely and refused to answer questions about their personal life. In an industry that demands everything be public, Dolly and Carl created a private world that belonged only to them. Carl admits there were times when the separation was almost unbearable. There were nights when Dolly was performing on the other side of the world, and he would sit alone in their empty house, wondering if this was all worth it. He would see other couples holding hands at restaurants or walking together in the park, and feel a pang of loneliness that cut deep. But then Dolly would call and her voice would fill the silence, and he would remember that what they had was worth any sacrifice. The hardest period came in the 1980s when Dolly's career exploded into Hollywood. She was making movies and spending months in Los Angeles while Carl stayed in Tennessee. The physical distance was bad enough, but the emotional distance was even worse. Dolly was entering a world Carl could not understand or be part of. She was becoming friends with movie stars and attending glamorous parties while he was back home laying asphalt and feeding the dogs. Lesser marriages would have ended right there. The gulf between their worlds had become so vast it seemed impossible to bridge. But Carl and Dolly had something most couples lack. They had complete trust in each other. Carl knew that no matter how many famous men threw themselves at his wife, she would always come home to him. Dolly knew that no matter how many local women flirted with the mysterious Carl Dean, his heart belonged only to her. They also had their rituals that kept them connected. Every morning, no matter where she was in the world, Dolly would call Carl at exactly 7 o'clock. They would talk about simple things like the weather or what the dogs did that day. These conversations were their lifeline. They reminded them that beneath all the glitter and fame, they were still just Carl and Dolly, 2 kids from Tennessee, who fell in love at a laundromat. Carl reveals one of their most sacred traditions that no one knew about until now. Once a month, no matter how busy their schedules, they would recreate their first date. They would get in Carl's truck and drive around Nashville just talking and laughing like they did when they were young. They would stop at a diner for burgers and milkshakes, and for those few hours, the rest of the world would cease to exist. These monthly dates became their sanctuary, where they could just be themselves without any pressure or expectations. As the years passed, their unconventional arrangement actually made their marriage stronger. Because they spent so much time apart, every moment together became precious. They never took each other for granted the way couples who see each other every day sometimes do. When Dolly came home from a tour, it was like a honeymoon all over again. When Carl surprised her with flowers, it meant more because it was unexpected. They learned to cherish the small moments that other couples might overlook. Carl also found unexpected benefits to his wife's fame. He loved seeing her on television, knowing that millions of people were enjoying her talent. He would go to the store and hear her songs playing and feel a surge of pride that this incredible woman had chosen him. He might not have wanted to share her with the world, but he understood that her gift was too big to keep hidden. Dolly was meant to bring joy to people, and Carl would never deny the world that light. But the most heartbreaking revelation Carl shares is about the children they never had. For years, people speculated about why Dolly and Carl never became parents. Some said it was because of her career, others claimed they simply did not want kids. The truth is much more painful. They tried for years to have children, but it was not meant to be. Dolly went through multiple procedures and treatments that took a terrible toll on her body and spirit. Carl watched the woman he loved suffer through disappointment after disappointment. During this dark period, their marriage was tested like never before. The grief of infertility can destroy even the strongest relationships. There were nights when Dolly would cry herself to sleep, while Carl held her, not knowing what to say to make it better. There were days when the sight of other families would send them both into a spiral of sadness. But instead of pulling apart, they pulled together. They grieved together, healed together, and eventually found peace together. Carl says that not having children actually brought them closer in unexpected ways. They became everything to each other in a way that couples with kids sometimes cannot be. Their love story was not diluted or distracted by other relationships. It was just the two of them against the world. They poured all the love they would have given to children into each other and into their extended families and charity work. Their marriage became their greatest creation. The years continued to pass, and with them came new challenges. When Dolly turned 50, she went through a crisis of confidence. The music industry is cruel to aging women, and she wondered if her time was up. Carl was there to remind her that her talent had nothing to do with her age. He encouraged her to keep creating and performing because the world needed her voice. His unwavering support gave her the strength to reinvent herself and prove that she was more than just a pretty face. Carl also reveals the health scares that nearly tore them apart. When Dolly collapsed on stage in the early 2000s, Carl thought he was going to lose her. He rushed to the hospital and spent days by her bedside praying for a miracle. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she said was sorry for scaring him. That moment crystallized everything for Carl. He realized that fame and money and success meant nothing compared to having this woman in his life. Then it was Carl's turn to face mortality. He was diagnosed with a serious heart condition that required immediate surgery. Dolly cancelled an entire tour to be with him, something she had never done before. She sat in that hospital waiting room for hours, refusing to leave even when friends tried to convince her to go home and rest. When the doctor finally came out and said Carl would be fine, she collapsed from relief. That experience taught them both that time was precious, and they needed to make the most of whatever years they had left. Now, in their golden years, Carl and Dolly have found a rhythm that works perfectly for them. She still travels and performs, though not as much as before. He still runs his business, though he has slowed down considerably. They spend more time together now than they have in decades. They sit on the porch of their Tennessee home watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. They have inside jokes that go back 50 years. They know each other's thoughts before they speak them. Carl admits he sometimes wonders what their life would have been like if he had chosen differently. What if he had embraced the spotlight and become part of Dolly's public persona? Would their marriage have been easier or harder? Would they have lasted this long, or would the pressure have torn them apart? He will never know the answer, but he has no regrets about the path he chose. He remained true to himself, and that authenticity is what Dolly fell in love with in the first place. The world wanted Carl Dean to be a certain kind of husband. They expected him to be on Dolly's arm at every event, supporting her publicly and basking in her reflected glory. When he refused to play that role, people could not understand it. But Carl knew something the world did not. The best way he could support his wife was by being exactly who he was. By maintaining his independence and his privacy, he gave Dolly the freedom to be fully herself. He was her anchor, her safe harbor, the one constant in a life of perpetual change. Carl also shares the funny moments that kept their marriage alive, like the time Dolly tried to cook him a fancy dinner and nearly burned down the kitchen, or when Carl attempted to surprise her with a song he wrote and forgot all the words halfway through. These moments of imperfection and vulnerability are what made their love real. They could be silly and messy and human with each other in a way they could not be with anyone else. He talks about the letters they still write to each other. Even in the age of texts and emails, Carl and Dolly continue their tradition of handwritten notes. They leave them in unexpected places for each other to find. A love note in a lunchbox, a funny poem on the bathroom mirror. These small gestures keep the romance alive after all these years. They prove that love is not just about grand declarations, but about daily choices to show someone they matter. Looking back on 57 years, Carl says the secret to their marriage is not really a secret at all. It is love pure and simple, not the fairy tale love of movies, but real love that survives distance and disappointment and decades of change. It is choosing each other every single day, even when it would be easier not to. It is respecting each other's differences instead of trying to erase them. It is understanding that two people can have completely different lives and still share one heart. Carl's final words about their marriage are the most heartbreaking of all. He says he knows their time is running out. They are both in their 80s now, and the reality of mortality is impossible to ignore. He thinks about what will happen when one of them is gone, and the thought is almost unbearable. After 57 years of marriage, they have become so intertwined that he cannot imagine existing without her. But he also knows that their love story will not end with death. What they have built together transcends physical presence. Their love will live on in the music Dolly created, and the lives they touched, and the example they set. For what marriage can be when two people refuse to follow anyone's rules but their own. The man who stayed silent for 57 years has finally told his story, and it is more beautiful and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Carl Dean loved Dolly Parton enough to let her fly while keeping his own feet firmly on the ground. He gave her roots and wings, freedom and stability, adventure and home. Their marriage survived everything the world threw at it because they never forgot the simple truth they discovered at a laundromat in 1964. Sometimes love is not about being everything to someone. Sometimes it is about being exactly enough. And for Carl and Dolly, that has always been more than enough to last a lifetime.